Welcome. My name's Josh, living life alcohol free. If you're returning, thank you guys so much for being back here for this live stream check in. I'm thankful that I have opportunities this week to get back into the swing of things. I'm not working so early uh, and so many days this week. I've got that time off. I've got that. I had that birthday on Monday, and it's been a nice week just decluttering, getting cleaning up, getting rid of some things in my garage and my closet, and just it feels good to straighten things out in our lives. It's kind of like just getting rid of alcohol in our life. It feels good to actually try something different, to declutter, to kind of departmentalize our sobriety and put things and be able to put things into perspective and not, you know, feel like we're just carrying around this extra baggage. That's what it's like. So I started thinking about the challenge coming up 121 days of the Burr months September, October, November, December. I made a video and I included some of that info in there. I put a post on the YouTube channel and on the community and then on my Facebook group. So 121 days for me, it was like 4 months was really kind of the magic number. What for me, feeling like I kind of got to the other side of my cravings to drink, my urges to drink weren't as strong. It was somewhere around 2.5 months, 3 months, where I really felt I got over the biggest urge to drink. It was the biggest urge that I had. I was feeling just really down and out, really anxious, very self conscious, very guilty, and almost like ashamed. And I was able to talk through those thoughts, those feelings with my wife. I was able to post on my community. Was at the time it was This Naked Mind, a book by Annie Grace, and the community that I joined on there. Once I really decided I got to talk about this, I have to open up about my urge to drink right now because if I don't, I might drink. I might sabotage these last 2.5 months if I don't talk about it. And being somebody who likes to talk, I don't know why that's such an issue. I don't know why it's such an issue for us to open up and be honest about our urges to drink. It's like it's almost like we feel weak if we talk about how we're feeling about it. And but if we don't talk about it, we're susceptible to falling into back into and relapsing and falling back into drinking. So that urge that I had to drink around day 72, like I said, was about the biggest urge that I had since about day 9 or 10 when I had my first therapy visit in my sobriety. And I was like, I got to talk about this. So I posted on This Naked Mind. I went to Good Morning Pastel, and I told my wife I was having this urge to drink. I went on my group and I posted like I was having this urge. I don't know why exactly. I had an idea of what it was, but I wasn't 100% sure exactly the meat of the issue. All I knew is that the beer in my fridge. Thank you for thank you for subbing. Appreciate it. And I knew I had beer in my fridge. I had beer that I liked in my fridge. That was the key thing. I had some beer in there that I didn't really love anymore, but I had one of my favorites in there, and it was in there because we had a party recently. It was a graduation party for one of my daughters, and it was in there. And it was in there for a couple weeks up to that point. And I went to my group. I told them, I'm thinking about drinking this beer. I don't want to. I don't want to ruin what I've already accomplished. And I went and then I went and talked to my wife. She was home. I was lucky enough that she was home. She wasn't at work. I wasn't at work. We were able to just talk it out, um and I was able to get to the crux of it. And it had to do with the last night that I binge drank, the last night that I drank to this day. It was I had a blow up at one of my daughters my wife got involved, and it just turned into a mess. And it was a catalyst to my sobriety. I was embarrassed when I got up. I told my one of my daughters because she was accusing me of being drunk, and she wasn't wrong, but it hurt, and it it wasn't the first time she said that. It had been some years before that she commented on my drinking. That particular daughter, but for whatever reason, and I know the reasons that night, and it was just because I was so bent out of shape about not being able to control my drinking anymore. It was just one week after another during the pandemic, and it was like every week I was like drinking more and more, adding hard liquor, and it was and earlier in the day, and I couldn't quit. Good morning, everybody. Aria, Jet, Jamie, welcome. I couldn't quit. I wanted to be done. I didn't have the will to be done. I didn't have the tools to be done. I was so anxious all the time, which leads to irritability, which leads to anger, and my anger was just getting the best of me. It was to the point where it was like I needed to do something about this. Owen, welcome. So back in 90 days free. Nice. Congratulations on 90 days. That is awesome. That is kind of where this topic is kind of about that time, 90 days. It was between 2.5 months to 4 months. And my realization of that last urge that I had to drink, the biggest urge since that time, that was like the last huge one that I had. And I was able to get through it because I opened up. I told my wife, I told my group, and I got back. So I talked to my wife for probably a good 45 minutes. Got to the root cause of it. It was guilt. It was straight up guilt that I was craving that alcohol. That and the fact that it was my favorite beer, and it had been in there for a couple weeks, and it was kind of tempting, but not to a point where it was at that particular time. So I was able to then go back on my group. I had like 20 comments within that first hour, and one comment in particular stuck out, and we ended up being great friends throughout like the next 4 years on that sober group. But she had said, if you can make it through this urge, because it's the strongest one that you've had, you're going to be stronger for it, and you're going to be able to get through the next one easier. And that piece of advice was what I needed to hear at that particular time. And that's what makes being on a sober community so vital, is because we don't know when we're going to hear what we need to hear when we need to hear it. That is the biggest part of the community. That's why I started this channel. That's why I started my Facebook group. That's why I love talking about this, is because I'd rather be doing this than pretty much anything else, drinking especially. And and then just having a community and having dialogue with you guys, and having friendships and forming friendships, and that's what keeps us on this path, and um, we're able to just keep going even when we have difficult times, because those difficult times do come. But if we have the right community, we have the right tools in place, because it's not always just about community. It also helps to have other things in our life that we can turn to, that we can use and lean on when we're feeling like that. For me, it was taking walks or hikes. It was taking drives. It was just getting in my car and getting out of my house. My house has been a struggle. Was always a struggle for me from the very beginning of basically my wife and I getting together. It was a point where I married her, She had 3 girls. We were, they were 6, 8, and 10 when I met her, and it was a point where it was like, as soon as I moved in, I became, that parental figure, and being someone who didn't grow up with much, like many people. I mean, I was an only child. It was basically just my mom and I, and I never changed a diaper. I never took care of kids. I didn't have any experience with any of that. And I took a leap and I took a chance. And by the time I got to know her, my wife, um, I was just like, you know what, I can do this. And it was a little bit easy for the first year or two. I would say a couple years. It was easy. We were still, my wife and I were still in that um, that early phase of just, we were enjoying each other's company, drinking wine or beer or whatever, and just unwinding. But as the responsibilities got a little bit more, and then we got a house, we had a daughter of our own, we got a dog, and all these things that were more and more responsibilities. They all added up, and it got to a point where being at home, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. We had some other major issues. One of my daughters in particular, we were having, like, going through, like, mental, she was going through mental things, and I don't want to get into too many specifics about that, but it was very hard on my wife and I was just not at a capacity where I could be the person that I needed to be for my wife, because I wasn't in a mental space for it. I was drinking more. I was drinking all the time, and I was using that to cope and to escape. And needless to say, all that just leads to nowhere good. And so that urge that I was having, in that day 72 of being alcohol free, was kind of all that stuff coming to a head. It was kind of all those guilty feelings I was having. It was that one last night in particular, because I felt bad. I mean, I was always kind of the person that, I was quiet. Like I said, I was kind of alone when I was younger, but then somewhere along the line, I decided I'm going to be more vocal. And then when I speak up, and I started to speak up for myself, and not, you know, want to be a doormat kind of a thing, I took it to the other extreme, which is like I said everything that was on my mind, good or bad. And that can get us into trouble. Welcome, Christoph. And it got me into a lot of trouble, especially in those periods, that period of time between like 2015 and 2020. Those 5 years, from having a new house and a daughter and all these things, and a dog, and all that. It just, and so I would say what was on my mind, regardless of the fallout from that. And my wife would always say, "You're saying it like you're angry," and it's hard for us to see that when we're drinking all the time, especially. But just in general, it's hard to acknowledge that we are a certain way, and sometimes we act the way that we want to act, and then someone is critical of us, and tells us we're acting like we usually do, and it's like, no, no, I'm not. And that would make me more mad. So it was like, I felt like I was gaining on things sometimes, but then I would get to a point where she'd say that and then just make me more bitter again. And um and that was the thing about recovery, was that, all those years that my wife and I kind of, were at each other here and there. It was to a point where when I quit drinking, I knew that I was going to have to lean on her and be vulnerable to be able to get to where I wanted to go. Regardless of her reaction to it, I was going to need to be open, and because we live together, we are married, we are that is my closest relationship, that she is my, my partner. So that was tough, because I was full of pride. It's when we're drinking, we're dealing with anxiety and depression and mental health things. The hardest thing is to be able to be open. And but I knew the years leading up to when I finally quit, that eventually that was going to be like the key that unlocks my success at quitting drinking, was going to be my ability to be open, be honest, be willing, and not just with myself, but with my wife and with those around me, our kids, um, and whoever it is that I need to start to form boundaries with. Um, that was what I was going to have to do. So, but that piece of information that I got from that friend on This Naked Mind at that particular time and that particular day in that particular situation was exactly what I needed to hear. And that's a piece of advice that I try to talk about often. It's not in every video, obviously. Every video has a different topic. It's not in all the live streams or anything like that, or something that I talk about all the time. But if someone needs to hear that, I'm there, and that is what's rewarding to me, to be able to give back what someone else gave me at that time in my life and my recovery, that I needed to hear that. So that's kind of what this topic's about today. If you guys have any other topics you want to talk about today, please feel free to share it in the comments. Nikan, if I'm pronouncing that right, Nikon, hello. If you shout loudly, you'll give me $50. Man, that's uh, Nikonal. Is it Nikani? So so let's talk about the urges that we have to drink, why we have them, and how we can get through them. That particular urge, like I said, was the strongest one. I made the post earlier on my Facebook group and on the community on YouTube, and talked about it in my last video about this coming up, um, September. So September 1st, uh, last year at this time, pretty much in August, when August started, I started to formulate, and I saw someone had posted a picture of the Burr months coming up: September, October, November, December. I never really gave it any thought that those last 4 months of the year ended in Burr, and it kind of was like, wow, that was an epiphany that I had because of that post. And then I thought, well, how can I attribute this to my sobriety? Because fall is my favorite time of year. It's my birthday. It's got a lot of the things that I like to do and interests of mine, that just football time, uh, cider mills, Halloween, colder weather, cooler weather. Like, to me, this is like the perfect weather. It's cool in the morning. It's 70 in the afternoon. It's usually sunny, and just hiking is awesome, and bonfires. And then getting over through Halloween, though, then it starts the holiday season. So we got Thanksgiving and Christmas, and those times should be fun. But I found myself, for pretty much the first 3 or 4 years in my recovery, feeling stressed out about particularly Christmas, but even get-togethers for Thanksgiving and Halloween, and functions in the fall time, where people are drinking, cider drinks, alcoholic beverages, Oktoberfest beers. And my favorite cider mill has a winery there. they opened it up like 10 years ago, and for, needless to say, I was still drinking at that time, and it was appealing to me. So, but at least I got to try some of the ciders, and they're good, but I mean, they're not something I'd buy all the time. They're very sweet, for the most part, and I'd go and I'd get like a growler of that, and have that just once and be fine with that. So I'm glad that I got to experience that, because now when I look in there, and I don't really have the FOMO, like the fear of missing out, when I look over there and see people enjoying that. It's like, that's a nice thought, but I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna get my regular cider and donuts and enjoy that. And then I'm gonna go and get in my car. I'm gonna drive home. I'm not going to feel buzzed or feel paranoid that I'm going to get pulled over. I'm not going to go home and drink more, which is what I always did. And I'm not going to drink the rest of the day and wake up tomorrow feeling like crap. So those 24 hours, those are 24 hours that we can't get back. And that it might be enjoyable for an hour, maybe even a few hours while we're drinking. But then, um, but then the next 24 hours are not fun. We have a hangover. We might have done things that we regretted. So that just makes us add guilt on there, which guilt is makes us anxious. The alcohol, the hangover, the alcohol leaving our body, that makes us anxious. We really only feel better when we get to the next binge, or we have a day where we're sober. But then we always go back to alcohol, and that's kind of how it was for me. I would always go back to it, even if I took some time away from it. But there was very few days that I had sober, um, for basically the last 10 years of my drinking. I Once I met my wife, I was pretty much an everyday drinker. Sadly, before that, I was like every other day. I mean, I drank so much that I didn't really feel like drinking the next day. So I would know what it felt like to be sober. I could go out with friends, or go to an event the next night and not drink. And I didn't want to drink. I didn't like it. Just I didn't feel like drinking, because and that was in my 20s and early 30s. But like I said, as soon as I met my wife and we got together, and it was like, um, I was drinking less per session, but I was drinking every night. And I had a job where I had to get up at like 6:30 in the morning, and so I couldn't stay up, all night drinking or whatever. So, and I didn't get home till like 7 o'clock at night. So it was easier to kind of not drink as much in that window of time. So if I'm drinking from like 7 p.m. to, say, like 11 p.m., how much can I really drink? You know what I mean? If I'm averaging a couple drinks per hour, so like 8 drinks. Needless to say, some nights I'd go overboard, I'd mix, and then I can count probably just a few times that I ended up going to work during that period of time, like really feeling bad. But I didn't really miss work because of hangovers. And if I felt really bad enough, I still would fight it and go into work. Um, but it was during that 2015 period, yeah, when all those things changed, and all the things became very, very serious. Really, a lot of responsibility. These are things that I wanted eventually in my life. And I always thought that you had to prepare first for to have a family. I always thought that was going to take. I was going to have a certain amount of money. I thought I was going to have to be in the right mental mindset. I thought I was going to have to not be drinking. I thought, all these things, and that's really not how it unfolds. Uh, we just throw ourselves into the fire, and we don't have things figured out at all. And that's really what I learned. One of the things that I learned when I quit drinking was that, I want to grow up, not just grow old. I want to experience true growth, and I'm not going to be able to do that unless I stay alcohol free. And that was another thing I would think of when I would have urges to drink. I would think, you know, if I drink, I'm not going to have the life I want. I'm going to sacrifice my day today and basically tomorrow because of the hangover for alcohol. That's 2 days. That's 2 days that I'm not going to get back. And I did that for too many years, to a point where it was like I don't want to do that anymore. Now there's still, like, I got a lot of views on that, the an alcoholic's day. That was like the biggest, so far, the biggest video that I've made. And that one didn't really even take off until like 5 months after I made it. And all of a sudden, a couple months ago, it just started jumping up, and it's still going up. I mean, it's gone down in views, but like it still has traction. And I think it's just because a lot of people resonate with that particular um, story. Just what it's like to wake up in the morning, to think about alcohol or to have a hangover, but also know that once you get to a certain time of your morning or lunchtime, you're going to start thinking about drinking again. And you get to that drinking session, and it's like a relief. And then, you drink the rest of the day or night, and then you wake up at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning with anxiety, with stomach ache, with a headache, and all these nasty feelings. And you you might get back to sleep, you might not, but either way, the next 6 hours is just, you're like a zombie. Maybe you have alcohol like coming out of your skin. You can tell that people probably can smell it. I actually had somebody comment one time in my 20s that, no, I was in my early 30s. I was around before I met my wife, but we had a new person hired in, and she spoke her mind a lot. And we're standing there, and she just out of the blue says, "It smells like alcohol in here." And my face turned bright red. I'm sure she was referring to me, but I don't, even to this day, I don't know that for sure. But I was like, I just said something like, "Oh, so and so brought some rubbing alcohol over from there. It must be that," or something like that. But I kind of just kind of peeled myself away from that uh, situation, went to another room, and kind of just was like, "Dang, I wonder if people can smell it on me." That was the first time I really felt self conscious about that. But I always kind of felt like it, though. So, but that's what the day of an alcoholic is really like. And as you guys know, I don't really like to refer to myself or other people with the term alcoholic. I prefer to use other terms, just whatever: drinker, heavy drinker, functioning drinker. I don't know, just anything like that. But labels, I don't really think help us. And that's another thing that really helped me get through those urges to drink early on, was just not, you know, kind of saying to myself, and that was what Annie Grace's philosophy was as well, the author of This Naked Mind, the book, was that we, if we give up alcohol on our own volition, um, we don't need to use labels. Like, we feel better without alcohol, so we don't want to go back to it. And she actually did a test after being alcohol free for 4 months, and she recorded herself drinking a bottle of wine or two, and watched herself, and discovered that, I don't like that person that I am when I'm doing that. And she just went back to being alcohol free, and then ended up, ultimately writing a book and having a she even has like a classes, like a institute kind of a thing, where she has instructors and the coaches and all that, and she basically built a small empire revolving around this. And but her philosophy was, don't feel the need to use like labels. She doesn't even use the word sobriety or sober. But I like that term because for me, it was not just about being alcohol free. It was about the choices that I made while I was drinking. I still liked to smoke pot every now and then. Um, Tom says, quit smoking 5 years ago. Congrats, Tom. That's awesome. Giving up smoking is hard. Especially, I found giving up smoking wasn't as hard for me as alcohol, but I was always smoking when I was drinking, and and eventually, my doctor said sometimes you need to quit one thing to quit another, because I was wanting to quit alcohol and I was wanting to quit smoking, but I said I only smoke really when I drink. I mean, I smoked sometimes other than that, but for the most part, I think it was my drinking that was holding me back. But I was just getting palpitations from it, just issues like that. So I just decided, enough's enough. And I met my wife. She wasn't a smoker, so it was kind of like I just acclimated to just drinking and not smoking. And yeah, but quitting the drinking, that was my biggest thing, and I knew that it was going to be, because that was the thing that I leaned on. That was where I got my solace in life. That was what I used to cope with life. That was my crutch. And it was, it was hard to give up. But it was hard getting through those urges. But man, having a group is huge. So that's what I got for you guys today. For those of you that have joined and subbed, thank you so much for being here. For those that are back, please check in. I've got that sobriety group, and the link is pinned in all my videos. Check out some of my other videos. I discovered recently, through a subscriber, that if you click on the subscribe button and click the down arrow, there's a join button, and then you can join and become a member. That's just another way of getting more content. I haven't made any additional comment or content yet. I've had early releases of my videos so far for members, but I haven't gotten into that uh, completely yet. I will eventually, but like I said, this is a slow growth. I actually had somebody comment yesterday. That's she said, "You're only doing this to make money. Stop." And I thought, well, I'm not going to reply to that, because I mean, I don't need to justify myself, but I'm not making money on this. I mean, I just became monetized, but I still have to reach like a threshold in order to get paid for the first time. And even when I do get paid for it, it's not going to be that much money. So I'm not doing this for money. Like, that was never my goal. At the beginning was always to help people. Yes, I love making content. I've stuck with it for over a year now, and I do want to make this my at least like a part-time job, because I've been spending 20 or so hours at least, or more. Um, if you factor in like my thinking about it, my actually making content, and then answering comments and things like that, I mean, it's a full-time job. So yeah, it's more than a hobby. And but that's not my main motivation, and it won't be. I've never been led by money. Money has never been something that has um, inspired me, I guess would be the word, or been like a catalyst for me to get into something. And I go into some detail about that in some of my videos, My dad was always someone who really was motivated. I guess that's the word, motivated by money, and sometimes motivated by notoriety, I think, too, to a certain extent. He was pretty well known in his uh, business anyway, in his sector, um, which was advertising. Um, and it was, but I looked at that, and he always had extravagant stuff, would go on trips, extravagant, like nice trips, but he was never fulfilled, he was never satisfied. And for me, it was like I watched him struggle so much with his anger and with just other things, that sometimes our parents can teach us valuable lessons, but they can also teach us what we don't, what doesn't work. And I can tell, I could tell from an early age that money was never going to be something that was going to satisfy me. Could it solve some problems? Yeah, obviously. I mean, if we have more money, uh, we can fix up more things or buy more things or whatever. But for the most part, it's like, no, that's not a motivator. And for, like I said, for 27 years I drank alcohol. That was all I really wanted. And now that I don't drink, there's other things in life that are fulfilling, and it's these little things that for me that are fulfilling. It's spending quality time with my family, my pets, and being present, and then um, hiking is a big thing for me. Riding my bike sometimes, exercise, reading scripture, um, getting a good night's sleep. But I like to read. I like to watch movies and things like that, and I don't forget everything that I did before. And I feel like I have more energy to do the things that I wished I would have done all those years that I was drinking. So those are the things that I'm motivated by. And so yeah, that comment bothered me a little bit, but I try not to buy into that fuel. And I actually, that's why I think it was stepping stones to get to a point to build this channel, was because I had a couple, at least, well, one in particular, that on This Naked Mind, that, and I think he's still there, but he would come in and say some really rotten stuff to us. And it wasn't just me, but it was almost everybody that I talked to on there would say, like, so and so, do you know about this person? And I'd be like, yeah, yeah, I've had a couple run-ins or whatever, um, but it was honestly, and then I would spend like time thinking about how to respond to this person, and it was like after two or three times of that, I was like, I'm spending way too much time thinking about this. And during that year, 2022, 2023, I started to kind of build some tools that helped me not care so much about what other people thought or said. And it took about 6 months, 7 months, even that whole year basically, to get to a point where I was like, you know, yeah, I think I feel better about it. It's not one thing that solves that. It's just like anything else. Like it's a series of things, and it's complex, but it takes work and effort, and looking within, and then feeling confident on our self-esteem, health, and all those things are aside from free. But I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not stayed alcohol free. That's the biggest thing. And like I was going to say a little bit earlier, was that I still don't say that I'm never going to drink again. I just don't do that. And that was one of the comments that I got recently that said, you're an alcoholic, and if you'd serve yourself better if you refer to yourself as that. Because if you I've seen many people over the years that refuse to call themselves an alcoholic, and then they end up relapsing. And I don't remember if I don't think I responded. Maybe I did. I think I might have ended up just deleting the whole thread because I was like, this is taking up too much time. It's not helpful for me. It's not. I'm not going to convince this person, and it's not helpful for the conversation for everybody. So but for I think it's important to recognize that for me, I don't think that those people relapse because they refuse to call themselves an alcoholic. I think they relapsed because they weren't working on what needed to be worked on while they were not drinking. It's not just not drinking, it's working on all the other aspects of our lives while we're not drinking. And like I said, I still don't say I'm never going to drink again. When I when I first quit, I was really just planning on I wanted like a normal drinker, like have one or two and be done. I kind of started to learn that I don't think that that was going to be possible. That I kind of crossed over to addiction. Not kind of, I did, and I'm not going to be someone who can just have a drink or two and just be done. So I started to accept that, and then I started to think, you know, I want to get to 1 year alcohol free. That was what Annie Grace talked about doing. That was her philosophy made sense. It was like experience life events. Um, she didn't even talk too much about working on yourself, but that was part of the whole process. Was um, you know, how to cope with life without drinking, without alcohol. And for that period of time, over that 1 year, it was like, yeah. And I got to that 1 year, and I actually did feel a little uneasy and a little bit like I was anxious because I wasn't sure if I wanted to. I think the real anxiety was I wasn't sure if I wanted to celebrate my 1 year. I wasn't sure if I wanted to give it any weight. I've never been a person that really um I never was a person that really liked to celebrate things, especially myself. And I felt like this shouldn't be any different. So I got to that 1 year, and I was a couple weeks or a week before. I think I was a couple before the 1 year, and I made a therapy visit just to go in there and kind of talk about my anxiety around this 1 year thing. Ultimately, I ended up telling my wife that I'd like to just do a little something. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but like I do want to just acknowledge that this 1 year is something. And she bought this NA sangria that ended up tasting horrible. And but we had a glass of it, and she got me a little society gift, like a little keychain, and I still have it to this day. It's the little Trinity uh, triangle, and you know, I never did AA or like celebrate recovery or anything like that, but I still thought that it was a nice gesture. Our oldest daughter, wrote a card for me and told me how proud she was that I made it to 1 year and was excited to see what was in store for me. And it was just those couple of things that solidified in my mind that, you know what, I'm on the right path. This is where I'm supposed to be. This is right. And I don't want to drink anymore. So my next goal will be to get to 2 years, and that's what I did. And then in that period of time, because I quit in April, so I was about um, at a year and a half when the next New Year came in, and I started making New Year's resolutions, and they were organic resolutions. They were something that I was building up towards at the end of the year. And then when we got to New Year, I was like, I've been thinking about this. I might as well make this something that I'm going to accomplish this year. And I did that, and I've been doing that ever since. And I've accomplished quite a bit in those New Year's resolutions. Um, and so yeah, so I make those goals, and aside from being alcohol free, but I don't know what life holds in store for us. I mean, there's tragedies that happen in life. There's things that happen that are out of our control, and you know, if I don't have the willpower or and I don't think I need willpower at this point. I mean, I've had plenty of things happen over these 5 years that have been triggering enough for me to think about alcohol, but I don't think about alcohol when those times arise, and that's something that's beautiful. So that and I get through it, and I'm like, especially those first 2 or 3 years, I was like, I didn't think about alcohol one time during this. So I don't know what life holds exactly, but I do know that I have communities, I have people in my life that I can turn to. I have coping mechanisms and tools in place that I don't think that I'll ever want to turn to alcohol. But like I said, I don't know what life holds. I would talk to my therapist about this early on, and then like around that 1 year mark, and he would say, I might go back to cocaine. He was addicted to cocaine. That was his vice. And, I might go back to using drugs or drinking or whatever when I retire. But I don't know. Um, but like, we're busy. We're busy with stuff. So we're not thinking about that, anymore. It's not important to us anymore. But I don't think that I would even get to a point where I would want to, turn to other things, because I know that they don't work. Alcohol being the main one, but other things as well that are not good for us. Um, they don't work. They make us feel good for a short time, but then they leave us feeling empty. And I think that's for me. That's where faith came into play. That something was missing. A couple years into my recovery, and I turned to my faith more, uh, and that's really been something that's been fulfilling for me in my journey. That was one of my resolutions in 2024, was to read the Bible. I read the whole Bible cover to cover, and when I started this year, I planned on reading more books because I really enjoyed reading the Bible, but I was just going to read more novels and things. I read a couple books, but then like 2 weeks after the new year started and I wasn't reading scripture anymore, I felt like I was missing it, honestly. Like something was missing. And I went back to the app that I was using. I found another, it's called the YouVersion Bible app. I found another different reading plan other than the one I was doing before, but there's like hundreds of different plans, and they all have different layouts of the daily readings. But yeah, I went on there. I started doing that, and I've been doing that like 20 minutes a day, 15, 20 minutes a day since then, on top of reading more books. And that's what I've been doing this year. So yeah, just getting over these urges to drink, they're huge. They make us stronger for the next one. That's really what I wanted to get out and convey today. So thank you all for being here. I got to work early on Friday. I probably won't do another live stream till next week, maybe Monday. But I'll have another video out on Sunday. Check out the one I posted for today if you haven't checked that out yet. And yeah, please like and subscribe. Come along with us on this journey. And I'm so grateful that you guys were here today. So have a great sober day, everybody, and we'll talk to you on the next one.